Be right back. Testing, testing. Okay. Oh, it's always a hassle with these technology things. Okay. I will go ahead and get started. Hello, Lionel Daniel. Let me set myself up here. Almost finished. See, that's what happens. Trying to go back outside because we have fall weather. Yeah, so let me know. Hopefully audio levels are good. Perhaps you hear some chimes in the background. You know, those are like the patio chimes. Let me show you. Show you this right quick. Those are those chimes that you just buy for like outside. My wife bought those. They're very pretty. So you might hear that because it's a little windy. It's fall weather, but it's still like mid 80s. So still pretty hot out here. But you know, in summer it's not unusual to be upper 90s nowadays. So it's relatively cool. But I just thought I should, you know, try and do some stuff outside. And yeah, so welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm your host, Neil Trotter. And we will, let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll just get started. Just trying to set up my windows. Yeah, okay, so yeah, this is our regular live stream that we do here on the channel. You know, in case maybe you're new, you're watching either live or, you know, after the fact. We do a philosophy videos on philosophical texts. But then I started doing these live stream events because it's trying to up my philosophy game. Trying to, like, you know, not just be a philosophy enthusiast, philosophy hobbyist, but maybe even philosopher, amateur philosopher. But how do you do that? You can't, you know, I feel like you can't just read text and that's it, right? And then some, but then I do these videos where I talk about text too. But you know, I think it's nice to talk with people, not at people, and you know, bouncing off ideas, you know, in real time, dealing with agreements and disagreements in a critical way. Yeah, so I think that's a lot of part of philosophy is doing that, like actually talking to people, person to person, or you know, in this case virtually, but still like in real time. So I'm just trying to build my game. And that's what these live streams are all about. So hello, Lionel Daniel. How am I doing? Yeah, I'm doing good. Back home, last time we did a live stream, I was up in the other city. I'm in Tennessee. I live in Memphis, but I was in Nashville. In a hotel room doing a nice debate. That was fun. I was like, you know, I'm in Nashville, you know, I'm traveling, but I still could do this. I still think I could hold that down, and I did it. It was fun. You know, check that out. But we're back home here, and I just took it back outside. And so how are you, Lionel Daniel? I'm doing okay. So today's topic is you know, an interesting one because I often get comments. This is like not a thing I just made up on my own. Is other, you know, I'll get comments from time to time. It's not like an unusual comment. They'll ask, do you read the introduction of books? Do you read the prefaces of books? Do you read the appendices? Do you read the footnotes? Hello, Ishmael. Oh, hey, cool. Oh yeah, because it's that 1 p.m. time for me, but for you it's like 7 p.m. or something like that. So I guess this works. Yeah, sometimes I just have to change the time depending on my schedule. So yeah, you know, that's a question I get asked more often than not. Like, do you read? When you read books, do you read the intro? Do you read the preface? Do you read, you know? Because a lot of people skip those. They'll skip the introduction and be like, oh, that's not actually the real book. That's just some translators' opinions, or like, you know, maybe it's. I think prefaces are written by. One of them is written by. I forgot which one. It's intro, prefix. One of them is written by another person, and the other one is written by the author. And you know, I even read I read them all. You know, I read the footnotes. Some people get very annoyed by footnotes. They're like, it disrupts their flow of reading. They're like, oh, you know, now I gotta, you know, look down in the margins, or maybe even like you gotta turn the page all the way back to the notes section, and it just disrupts my flow of reading. I like footnotes, but we can talk about that. And then Lionel Daniel says, how I read the difficult book? Should I reread the paragraph or sentence? I I got disconnected here. Okay, I'm back. Might get disconnected from time to time because, you know, sadly, internet over here in the deep south ain't the best. Our infrastructure, American infrastructure, isn't the best, period. Sad to say. But here in the south, they really don't care. But so I got it. Your question, yeah, you should reread paragraph or sentence. Yep, that's definitely a thing you should do, but particularly when you read difficult books. You don't have to, but it's definitely good to do it. I know there's a lot of discouragement out there for rereading books and rereading texts and like slowly reading. That's like a negative. Like, you know, you should read as fast as possible, but it's like, well, are you absorbing the information? I say read as slow as you want. So it's good. Now you might not, you know, the problem is like, well, I'm only reading one book and it's taking me a month or over a month. It's like, so to me, it's, but you can read 5 books in a month, but if you don't, you know, retain the information, then what's the point of you reading it? You know, I don't know. We're just talking about difficult books, but yeah, so I read the extras is what they call. I don't think they're extras, right? You know, some books even have appendices. I bring up some examples, right? Because you know, I just did a video on this book, Aristotle's De Anima, or On the Soul. And the introduction is like half the book, right? The introduction is over 100 pages. Then there's a glossary. Right. So, I mean, that's the introduction. It's literally half the book is the introduction. Right? So people are like, why would I read, like, it's too much. It's like, that's not that's not Aristotle. That's just somebody else. That is a translator. And then I think there's even notes at the back. Yeah. So actually, the book is not very. There's a. Let me show you. There's this section at the end. That's just like notes, like footnotes. And this is another book. Eventually, we're gonna do a video on this book. This one, Art of Rhetoric, very extremely popular work of Aristotle. I haven't did a video on that yet, but I will. But another one where it's like intro is huge compared to the book, and then of course you got footnotes. I'm sure that's a lot of footnotes here. It's actually not that bad. Then you say, thanks for your advice. You are the greatest. Well, thanks. Thanks. Thanks for watching. You know. And then I'll just describe it to you, the various extras of a book, which I think is pretty cool. But we'll get into why I think it's cool. But you know, with the footnotes, you'll be reading, and then there'll be a little number, and sometimes they'll have it on the bottom of the margins. Some people find that annoying, but some people really get irritated when they're like, "Oh, okay, there's the number, so I have to go all the way in the back and look. Okay, this is number 57 of section 8. All right, what do you have to say?" Okay, and usually it's like a commentary, like what Aristotle actually means is not the same thing as what he meant in another word. You know, it's giving me background information. And some people are like, and then often people will complain. They'll be like, "Wow, now they disrupted my flow of thinking. So now I'm back, and I have to rethink about what I was thinking before." So you know, I'll pose the question to you: do you read introductions, prefaces, afterwards, footnotes, suggested, all types of like appendices? We got a plane. That's a news report plane. I mean, that's a helicopter. Yeah. But we outside. That's why we can hear that. But yeah. Do you read? And so I would like to make the case that I think it's good to read those extras. And I'll tell you a bit why I think it's important, or it's cool. I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. You don't. I mean, if it's not assigned reading at school, and you're not, you don't even have to do it at school, unless maybe if you're trying to get a good grade, then you're gonna have to do it. But I think it's a good idea to read the quote unquote extras. Particularly, I always have issues saying that word. Particularly when you're self-studying, when you're just reading for fun. I think it's pretty cool. And then Ishmael says, reading difficult books is mostly about your attitude towards the text. Do not put pressure on yourself when reading difficult books. Take your time and be like, it's okay, I don't get it. Yeah. That's how I feel too. Don't put pressure on yourself. And further, I would even say, like, you say like it's okay, I'm not getting it. I would even go further and say like, well, I'm not gonna get it. Some of these books, like some of these philosophical texts, are so complicated. Like, there's no way you're gonna understand what you're reading the first time you read it. It's just you have to be like, it's not even about intelligence. It's like these people, like Hegel or like even Aristotle, right? All these they're so complicated. It's not even like they're super intelligent. I mean, they are super intelligent, but it's just like they're in their own mind, and they're really like writing down like the inner workings of their head. So like you have to like get into their mind, and that's hard to do, to like get yourself out of your mind and into their mind, right? And of course, it's gonna be hard to understand what somebody is saying about a complicated topic when they're like really writing in their own head. Like a lot of these, like for example, Aristotle's like the Poetics. I didn't have that. That's another book I did a video on that has a long introduction. But the Poetics is not even like a formal text. It's like his notes, right? Aristotle's notes. So he's really just like jotting down in his head. He wasn't even like edited to a state of you being able to read it like an outside person reading it. Marcus Aurelius, same thing. He wrote it as a journal, as a diary, right? For the meditations. So I mean, to me, it's like, well, of course I'm not going to understand what this is at first, right? I mean, I would even get concerned if I was understanding everything. Like, am I reading this right? Like, I understand everything. So there's that. Now, with the when you're doing self-studying, when you're reading by yourself, so you go to, like, let's say you study like whatever English literature or whatever language literature in your college or university, or you study philosophy. You're gonna have like a professor or some sort of teacher who's gonna give you like a lot of background information. If you get assigned reading, like, okay, class, we're gonna read Aristotle today. Of course, like the professor's not just gonna give you the book and say, okay, go ahead, read. Right? They're gonna like explain to you certain things, right? They're gonna tell you like, here's the context from which this text originates from. This is why Aristotle is important. This is why this work is important. They're giving you like an introduction, right? So it's not like, that's why I think it's important, like particularly when you're like reading it on your own and you're not in a class, because if you're reading it on your own, you're lacking that. Like, there's no professor giving you like some extra context. So to me, when I read these books, the intro is like the college professor, like giving me some background information where I take notes. It's kind of like, okay, I'm in the class now. That's how I see it. Now, in the introductions, often you'll have the translators actually giving you information. So I think that's really cool, because there's always the question of, well, is the translator accurately giving me a good translation? Right. Because, there's a lot. Sometimes people will push back and be like, well, you're not reading the book in its original language, therefore you're not going to be able to understand everything. That was the only way you can truly get the best knowledge is you read it in its original language, which is, that's true, but if you're just kind of if you're not doing this on a professional level, right, I think it's fine. So if you rely on really good translators, because that's really the job of the translator, is to like make sure that you get as much information as possible. And if you're like me, like an amateur, I think that's good. So how do you determine how good a translator is? One of the ways to do it is to see what the translator is talking about in the introduction. I do that a lot. And then Ishmael says, Whitehead said that all of Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato. So if you're not into reading the extras, you're not reading philosophy. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I guess so. Let's see. All Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. I see your point. I don't know about all Western philosophy is referencing Plato, but yeah, I see what you're saying. Or they're referencing somebody from the past. Yep. Uh-huh. So you are missing out. You are missing out. I'm trying to think, like, let's say you're a professor that like knows like Latin or like Greek and you're reading like these texts in their original, then do you really have to rely on the footnotes of the others? Yeah, that's interesting. Not as much, but you still, like, they do give you supplementary information that always is good quality. And then Jeremy Borno says, hey Neil, hello. We should definitely take time to read difficult books. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, oh, it's a metaphor, right? Yeah. But I guess the metaphor is basically all Western philosophy is just referencing like the originals, like the Greeks or whoever, or like the OGs. I'm not even sure if that metaphor is accurate. But yeah, but definitely like if yeah, so for me, like footnotes, for example, let's focus on footnotes. Footnotes are great for me because they provide added context, supplementary commentary, which helps me understand the text better. Let's take, for example, I made a video about this book, Aristotle on the Soul. So when Aristotle says soul, he's just using the word soul, right? And he's just throwing the word out there. So I read the word soul, I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's soul, like the non-physical entity that's inside of us, that's like beyond our physical being, that's like the true essence of who we are. That's the idea of a soul, right? But that's not what that's not all that Aristotle is talking about when Aristotle says soul, right? And when you talk about the Greek language and they're saying the word soul, they're not just talking about that. You oftentimes you see the picture like a ball of light inside of a person that's like this non-ethereal entity that's like beyond the physical. It's not like the soul that we grow up with and learn. You know, when Aristotle says the soul, he's talking about like the interaction between the body and like the everything else, and how the body relates to like all the other existence, right? He's talking about that too. So he's also talking about like physical. He's not just talking about metaphysical stuff when he's talking about the soul. He's talking about like so when he's mentioning that, when he's saying the word drop of the word soul, he's talking about all types of things. But if I didn't read the introduction and, you know, the added footnotes, that would just went over my head, right? That they explain that, like you know, when you're reading and Aristotle drops these words, and then it gives you a little number that you go in the back of the book, and it's like, don't forget, when he's saying this word, he's not saying it in the way that we know it today, right? The way he's saying it, it means this, and this, right? So, and that's very helpful for me. Now, if you go to like a university, and the teacher's gonna tell you that, the professor's gonna say that, right? You might even have take an exam, and that might be a test question. What does Aristotle mean when he says the soul? And you would have to know that. But if you're just reading it for fun, and you don't have that direction, like that's where the footnotes really help, right? And then, let's see. Jeremy Barno says, if you were an author of fiction, would you use literary devices a lot? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. They're cool. Literary devices are cool. I'm more of like, I guess I'm a nonfiction guy. I like things when they're given to me like straight up, literally. Although, you know, I can get down with like metaphors and similes and abstraction and magical realism, all that stuff. That's pretty cool. But that's why I'm not really. Well, actually, I am. I do write it. You know, I have this. I can't say I don't write fiction because I do, but. I guess I wouldn't use that many literary devices, but that's why I'm not really hardcore into writing like that. Let's see what else you said. I'm reading Infinite Jest and it's full of notes. Check this book out. Eventually, yeah, I'm gonna. I think that's Charles Foster Wallace. One of these days, I'm gonna sit down and check out his works. I know, like. Many people feel many things about him. Some people think he's amazing. Some people think he's overrated. And this is smart people too, because a lot of people tell me like that guy is just a smart guy just throwing out words for no reason. Right? But then there's other people that are like, yeah, there's so much philosophy in his book. So one day I gotta make the determination for myself. So I haven't read any of his works yet, but eventually I definitely will. Do you study Greek languages? Nope. As you read and study philosophy? No, I don't study the Greek. That's too much. See, I'm reliant on translators, which some people they'll be like, that's a no-no. I don't believe that. I think like if you're trying to be like a philosophy professor, right, or you're trying to like get paid to do philosophy, like philosophy is your bread and butter, then okay, I could see somebody make an argument like, okay, you need to take some time and really, because I do think it's true. Like you're probably not gonna like 100. Really, the best way for you to understand the book is to read it in its original language and understand it. That is true. I think that's probably true. So the best way to do that would be to learn the language. But if you're not like, I think you can obtain like. Most like 95% of what's being said. If you got like a good translator, the challenge is like, so which translator is good, which translator is bad, And I would say like, well, a great way to do that. Oh, did I say David Foster Wallace? I think I said Charles Foster. Yeah, David Foster Wallace. Yeah. One of those Wallaces. Yeah, one day I'm gonna read his books. But yeah, but going back to what I was saying before, a great way to learn to determine if the translator is good, not read the introduction that the translator wrote. Right. Another way to do that is to look at the institution the translator is working from. I would argue, like, well, if he's working for Penguin, those Penguin classics, he's not going to be a half-assed translator, right? Because they got a standard, right? And it's not like I'm not like a diehard Penguin fan or anything like that. I'm just like, I know like they're a corporation and they're like, we need to make sure our books are up to snuff, or like people are gonna not buy our books, right? So they have a standard that they have to like uphold. That's what it's about. So I'm like, Penguin, but I am still like, well, let me read the intro because it still is a corporation. Now, sometimes universities have presses. Those are also a good indicator, right? Like, because, and I just say that because, universities also have to uphold the standard just because their reputation, they're trying to like make sure that we're the best. So they're going to get the pretty high quality translators, right? If they get bad translators, then their institution will look bad, right? So they got an incentive to try and get the good ones. But so that's another way to do it. If you're getting a translator and they're from some hokey institution, you need to be careful. But that they might be really good too, right? You check out their background and look at their intro, and then also like. Sometimes a translator from a very good institution might be not good because they're just riding on their reputation. Like, oh, I'll just write this because I know people are going to buy me because, I'm very well known in the institute, by the industry, right? So they're just half-assing their stuff. So there's a few ways for you to determine, like, if you don't know the original language and you're concerned about, is this book really like giving me the best or a good representation of the original author's work? There's ways of doing it. So I'm saying one way of doing that is to read their introduction, and even oftentimes they have footnotes. Like if they got a long introduction that's pretty in depth, and they're annotating like a lot. They have like suggestive readings and things like that are good. I'm like, okay, chances are, this is pretty good translator. And they're like, the ones I read, they'll like reference other translators and they'll like prop them and be like, this is also a good translator. You should check this one out too. So it's not like a competition. They're like very academic about it, citing sources. Like, so those are ways of doing it. And Ishmael says literary devices are more about timing and delivery than about quantity. So it depends on what you want to achieve with your fiction. Yeah. What about Aristotle's concept of the soul? Is fulfillment from what I studied in college. What I love about yeah, it's fulfillment. Yeah, we definitely talk about that in the video I made. Yeah, so that's cool. And then Ishmael says, knowing a little bit of Greek definitely helps and can make the reading more enjoyable, but it's not something that you have to do in order or enjoy a philosophical book. Another example I've actually is Hegel, right? Where you really don't need to know the German to like get the best out of Hegel. And I've been told this by, I personally know a few Hegel scholars, right? And I also know people who their first language was German. Their second language is English, and they read Hegel. And I also like, the introductions of translators who do Hegel. They've all said like Hegel is like a really bad writer, right? So if you, meaning like if you read the German of Hegel, it's like it's not any easier, right? You're not gonna get any easier interpretation, right? You know, people. I personally know Hegel scholars who are German, and they read German. It's like it's no different than reading a good English translation. Right? It's just he's just a bad writer. He's got really good ideas, but he doesn't really know how to express himself in like a way that's like understandable. You have to really like wrestle with his ideas. So then like so for Hegel, it's like you're not really gaining an advantage of reading his work in the original language. From what I've been told, like reading a translator, a very good translation of his work is just as good as reading him from the original. It might actually be better because you might have, like what I'm saying, you might have an intro, you might have annotated footnotes. That's going to help you like understand it, as opposed to just reading just the original German language. You're still going to be lost, right? So, I mean, that's an example there. A challenge with book translation is cultural context, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's a whole rabbit hole. I don't think the chimes are overriding my voice, is it? I think it's fine. But yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole. So I also know some translators in my life. I know this one person who knows French, and they know Latin, which is pretty cool. And they're a French translator. And you know, I'm always asking questions, and so I'm always happy to oblige people when they want to like go off and nerd out in their area of interest. So she just talked about me like, yeah, translation is not really about like word for word translation. You can't really do that in you're just like it's more like a very in-depth like summary. Right? You're really summarizing because like there's cultural like the languages don't match word for word or like idea from idea. You have to, all translators do like a like okay, this is what I think, right? So it's kind of is an art as much as it is a science, right? And sometimes there's only an artistic way of doing it where it's like, well, this word that's in French there's no English word for this, so I have to like create this thing. Right? And so that's where that's how translations vary from person to person. Right, so there's that cultural context that makes it different, but then there's also the just like oftentimes there isn't like an equivalent to the language, so the translator has to like, okay, well, I'm gonna do my best at like approximating the closest or the feeling of of what's being the meaning of the word. And that's gonna vary from translator to translator. And then Jeremy Borno says, for example, the culture of ancient Greece could be way different than what we interpret from its philosophy. Yeah, I'm trying to think of modern examples today. So in your opinion, translation is individualistic. I can agree to that. Yeah. I would say as somebody who's not in the field of translating, but has a few buddies in the translation industry, you know, just going off what they telling me, that it's just as much of an art as and they would even I've been told like sometimes it's even more of an art than it is a science. Right? It's, you know, since art is subjective. So that means there's some individualistic stuff going on. And then Ishmael says, even with a bad translation, you can still get something out from reading the book. So again, the key is no pressure. Yeah, you know, that's true. Yeah, no pressure. Just relax, have fun. I'm always about that, even with bad translation. And then, you know, it also depends on what is a bad translation. I guess there are some like objectively bad translation, but I've been, you know, I have this copy of War and Peace, and I'll do a video about that one of these days. So I do read fiction. War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy, and a book I have that some people are saying, like, you know, that's actually a very bad translation of the book. But I'm reading it, I'm like, I like it. I think it's pretty good. I pretty much enjoy it. So I don't know. I think it's pretty good. So I don't know. But maybe they're like, well, the reasons why I think it's bad because this, and this. I'm like, oh, great. That's more of an opinion. So that's true. Even if a translation misleads you by reading more books and meeting interesting people, you'll come across something that puts your ideas straight. Yeah, that's true. You have to definitely read more books and meet interesting people, right? What'll mess you up is if you read a bad translation and you'd be like, okay, that's it. Now I know everything, right? Which happens. It definitely happens a lot on the internet. You know, what even happens more on the internet is people will read bad interpretations of a text, and then other people will just go off of their bad interpretation of the book. So they're not even reading the book. They're just like going off of somebody's bad interpretation of the book. And now you really are messed up because you start thinking about, I mean, I remember somebody was debating with me about, Hegel actually, you know, his philosophy is all about it's about, like, I actually have this on a live stream somewhere. It's about like being like a war is good. War is good, yeah, violence is a good thing. Yeah, that was it. Violence is a good thing, and growth through violence is what Hegel wants, right? And you can see that, man. He started referencing these quotes, and I'm like, wow, you're really doing some literary gymnastics there. And I'm like, I don't think Hegel is saying like that. You know, I don't think Hegel was opposed to violence. I mean, he wasn't about non-violence, but he wasn't like celebrating violence. But this guy was telling me this, and he had a following, and he was like, yeah, Hegel is very pro-violence, and I'm like, no, I don't think he's saying that. But so yeah, you do have to be careful. Just like literature is artistic in itself, all translated books are subjective to personal interpretation of their original language. That's Borno. That's cool. Jeremy is saying that. Well, I was going to give an example, a modern day example of like culture. I'm studying Japanese. I've been studying that for when I was a teenager. I'm really into video games, like a nerd, and I'm really into Japanese role-playing video games, like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Used to be called Dragon Warrior, and like all that stuff. You probably don't, you know, if you're not a gamer, I just might be throwing names out there. You know, all these Japanese role-playing video games, I like them a lot. But back in the day, they were not translated. A lot of them just weren't translated here in the United States. They didn't have English translations. But I was like, I want to still play them, right? Fortunately, like, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and they have like that area has a nice Japanese American population. They have Japantown. They have two of them, one in the city of San Francisco, another one in the city of San Jose, which is in the Bay Area, the metropolitan area where I'm from. And so you can go to these places, and they're like little Japans, kind of, basically. like Chinatowns, but this Japan. So you can go to like they would sell language aids, right? Like you'd have Japanese dictionaries, you'd have Japanese language aids, and you can just buy them, for, pretty cheap. It's pretty cool access I had. I was like, I'll just go take the bus to a Japanese store, learning store, and get some little language aids, and then I would learn the language, and then I would like play the video games. Because you could even buy the little video games, or I used to emulate them because you could do that on a computer, emulate video games. And I'd have my language aids, and so I was learning. Nowadays, like all those games are being translated because the company now, a lot of these Japanese corporations, they're like, oh, there's a demand for these games. If we translate them and sell them, like we'll make a ton of money. So they finally got it. So they're now doing that. So it's like not that much of an incentive anymore. Anyway, like during the pandemic that hit, I had a lot more free time because you couldn't go out. I was like, I'm gonna go back to learning Japanese. And Japanese, like, I guess that's like all cultures. All cultures are like, they have a very patriarchal culture, a very patriarchal culture. But the thing about Japanese is the language is very patriarchal. And I talk to a lot of Japanese people, and a lot of also people who are, I had a tutor who was born and raised here, a white guy, Memphis, Tennessee, and he knows Japanese fluently because he's a nerd in Japanese media too. And I was learning, and he was telling me like, so a lot of these people are telling me, people from Japan, they're like, well, it's a cultural thing. Like it's not like conscious patriarchy or conscious sexism. It's just like kind of like, if, for example, like there's Japanese words, that equivalent to like slave, subservience, or like, submission. They use the symbol that's associated with the woman, because Japanese is a very symbolic language. Japanese has a ton of pronouns, which is and that's what makes the language very hard for people, English speakers, native speakers like me. It has so many pronouns, and the pronouns depend on the gender, right? So if you use a pronoun, but you're using it for the wrong person, the wrong gender, like it can be rude. But there's like 50, like there's so many damn pronouns. So it is a lot of memorization, right? But a lot of it's based off of gender, right? But it's based off of like the patriarchal ideas of gender, right? And it's so like it's like grammatically part of the language. So people don't even like think, they're not even aware of it. They just do it. Right? So when you're translating Japanese, there's this culture you have to be aware of. That's like so like internal, because the language itself is part of it. So oftentimes a lot of that just gets lost, right? And so you'll have, in the video games, you'll have these translations. Nowadays, like people are getting like way better, but in the 90s, you'd have these weird translations. Is like, this doesn't make any sense, because they took out a lot of that like patriarchal gender. Like it didn't translate into English very well, because we had the pronoun in English, I. I am, the word I. But in Japan, they don't have like a single I. They have like 30 I's, but it all depends on like the context. So you lose all that, right? when you're just using the word I. So it's very fascinating, right? So the translator has to like think about it, like, how am I gonna make this work? I only have this one word, I am. I can't just say I am, because it doesn't portray the meaning of like the pronoun I in Japanese. So how am I gonna make this work? That's why it's interesting, because Japanese video games are being re-released with translations, and the translations are becoming much better and like more accurate, but they're different. Like you'll see I remember playing a game in the 90s with a translation, and then they remake it, and it's like the year 2020, and it's like, okay, this translation is a lot more clear. Right? It's like based off of like the meaning. They had to do a lot of like sitting down and talking and thinking this through. Right? Maybe that 10 years from now they're re-releasing the translation will be even more different, probably. Right? And then let's see here, something that puts your ideas. Okay, and then Jeremy Borno says, just like literature is artistic. Oh, I reread that. Yep. Or did I? Yeah. And then I think I read that one. And then he says, "Don't worry, I grew up playing video games and I love manga and anime. I understand you." There you go. There you go. So you got it. I don't know how old you are, but it's funny because when did it happen? I'm trying to think. Maybe it was like, I guess it was like that the Cartoon Network, that they had this thing called Toonami, and then after that, like, Japanese media became like part of their pop culture. But before then, like, you were kind of like a nerd, or like that was like most people wasn't into Japanese anime and like gaming. But then they came out with the Dragon Ball, and really that was the one that popularized. And then I guess Naruto was the thing that really. And then all of a sudden, like, you can just talk about anime with anybody. Anybody's like, oh yeah, I know that. Like Japanese, you bring up these cartoons. Now I'm like lost because I'm older now. I don't follow the new anime, and like just random people will come. Have you seen Jujutsu Kaisen? I'm like, what is that? But apparently that's like the new anime. That's the new thing, and I'm just surprised. Like, wow, okay, dang, Japanese media has really exploded in the United States. That's cool. I remember they came out with a movie. A Dragon Ball movie with the character Piccolo was the main character, and it was like extremely popular here in the South. Tennessee, they came out, and it was like the highest box office. I was like, wow, people love the anime now. Long ass lines for this cartoon, Dragon Ball cartoon, in the theater. It was cool. My perspective of reading difficult books like philosophies is that it should liberate our minds. Yeah, I think so. Ever consider doing philosophical reviews on manga? Yeah. I don't know if there's enough substance. And there's been so many done. I remember one time there was a person that reached out to me, and they were from, they used to be, I don't know if they're still around. Yeah, there used to be this web series. It was called Footnotes. It was very popular. I wonder if it's still around. Probably not. Yeah, it's Footnotes, and there's that guy. There was a guy that like he had this thug, gangster rap persona, and he would talk about like books in this literary way, but he'd use that persona. And he did that. And there was somebody from that organization. I think the organization is called Wisecrack, which is Wisecrack. I think it is. They're probably still around because they had like millions of subscribers. And somebody from that organization reached out to me. They're like, "Hey, you want to do some philosophy videos?" And I'm like, first of all, I was like, okay, but is this like a paid position? Because I'm not just doing this for free. And they said, sure, it'll be free. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they were like saying that, like, oh, you can just do philosophy off of manga and like just pop culture. And it really was like, oh, you just want me to just take the cool thing that's out now, and like just like try and like come up with some philosophical concept for it or something. I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. Like Dragon Ball, that anime Dragon Ball. They're like, yeah, you could do a video off the philosophy of Dragon Ball. I'm like, yeah, but Dragon Ball like is not a philosophical. I mean, I guess if I really like, I can spin it that way. Like, if you really wanted me to do some creative, like BSing, I could. You know, I don't see, you know, or like you could do philosophy of Pokemon. Like, yeah, I don't think there's much philosophy in Pokemon. Yeah, you could do the philosophy, and you know, I guess all things have some element of philosophy in it, but you know, many things have. It's like very small. I enjoy many media that doesn't have philosophy. But what they were asking me to do, they were like, yeah, you know, I remember it was hot, like the Hunger Games. That was like the hot shit for a minute. Or Harry Potter. Like, yeah, talk about the philosophy of Harry Potter. It's like, you just want me to, like, they just want hits. They want views. So they're like, just take whatever's popular and just like try and like make it philosophical. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. No, thank you. I'm good. And I think they were turned off by my lack of interest to be part of the, because they were so big. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna sell out philosophy like that. So, you know, in terms of like takes manga and make, anime actually was what got me into philosophy, was one of the things, because I remember Ghost in the Shell, which is that Ghost in the Shell is tons of philosophy in that. I could do that. There's so many videos that are about that, though. I don't know if I would be adding to the conversation. Ghost in the Shell was one, and of course, like Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is like not, you know, really a cool thing. It's funny because that Ava Evangelion is still going, right? They just keep remaking it, or like doing these spiritual successors, and it's like, man, this series is kind of a shell of what it used to be. It's just become this money making. They just keep revamping it, but the original show was awesome. It had a ton of philosophy. I could do that, but again, like, I'm sure so many people have made it. Akira was another cool anime, like, in my opinion, had like, oh, this has a lot of philosophy in it. And there's many other anime that has philosophy, but I would argue most manga doesn't. Just like most media in general is like not really philosophical. You know, do the philosophical take on Seinfeld, or like, which I'm sure somebody has done, or like Modern Family, you know what I mean? Or like The Walking Dead. Do philosophical take. I'm sure plenty of people have already done it. So I don't know. Let's see here. Why would you explain about Japanese language in an example of paying attention to culture? What you explain about Japanese language is an example of paying attention to cultural context and translation. Yeah. Like when I watch mangas with subtitles, they were inconsistent. Yep. It's true. We all know the struggle. They don't do thug notes anymore, but they're still popular and still working. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure I mean, I remember I looked at them. They had like 1.1 million subscribers. I'm sure, like, I mean, that was like 10 years ago. Well, it wasn't 10 years ago, because I was doing the Black Ponder. It must have been like maybe 5-6 years ago. So I'm sure they got like 5 million or something. They don't do thug notes. Yeah, I wasn't really a fan of that thug notes, which is kind of the impetus to why I started this channel, YouTube, because I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like service level, and it has this gimmick, which I'm not really a fan. But, you know, maybe it got some people into literature. I don't know. Jaguar has a lot of philosophical background, actually. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can make a great video that will like talk deeply about the philosophy of Dragon Ball. I'm sure that will be an amazing video. But But I don't know. But I'm not seeing it. And I'm sure if I like sat down for like a few hours and like I could generate something, but I don't know. Maybe. Berserk is one badass anime that I enjoy. Yeah, I can't get into Berserk. Of course, so you know, I'm actually not into anime like I used to be. I read manga now because it's just faster. But you know, when I was a teenager, I was super into anime. But of course, like I still have plenty of friends who are really into anime and manga, and they always say like, you gotta read Berserk, 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 Berserk. And I read it, and I'm like, I don't know about this. I think it was kind of like too focused on, you know, I'm not really a fan of like hyper violence, to be completely honest with you. I understand like, you know, violence in media doesn't turn me off. I like fight scenes and shit. You know, I like what is it, the Keanu Reeves movies, John Wick or something. I like a good fight scene. I like the Star Wars fighting scene, you know, laser fighting, you know, violence in and of itself in you know, in terms of action, that's cool. I'm all about that. I just I just with Guts, it was just like, you know, it wasn't just like so, you know, as everybody knows, like Berserk is like an extremely super hyper violent and it's not like Mortal Kombat violent. It's like you know, triggering violence, right? It's like that kind of level of violence, you know, sexual violence and things like that. It gets, and to me it's like I get it, the world is violent, and some people like really take that into like, well, you know, it's just trying to describe the world as it is, and you know, but for me it's like, are y'all just doing this to be cool? Like, you know, a violent thing will happen to Guts and they'll be like, yeah, you know, Guts is a badass because he can take all the pain, and you know, I'm like, I just kind of thought it was kind of tired. Like, you know, and after a while I'm reading, I'm like, was this really necessary? Like, are you just putting this in here for like coolness factor? Like, I don't know, which is kind of like a turn off to me. I personally, not to be a prude, to be like, you know, oh, you're just like a L7, you're a square because you're not into violence. I like, you know, like fight scenes are cool, but when you guys start like having these overly violent, like, you know, these, and it gets like really like trauma just the sake of having trauma. I'm like, okay, like what is all this really about? You know, it's I was turned off by, because I just feel like that series relies too heavily on like trauma for like coolness factor, which is like, yeah, no. Yeah, I could get it, but you know, I know a lot of people really love Berserk. You know, I have you know, I have friends, lady friends who are like, yeah, but you know, they're literally like, this is my favorite anime manga of all time. You know? And I'm like, hey, more power to you. More power to you. But yeah, that's cool. Okay. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about in terms of. I would encourage you to, you know, read introductions, because some people will say like, oh, I skip the intro, you know, I skip prefaces, I skip, you know, afterwards, and you know, I don't read footnotes, which is, you know, that's your prerogative. You do whatever you want. But they then, you know, I get comments like, why would you read the intro? Like, that's not even the author's, the original authors is not talking about, like you're not gaining any additional information. You're just like, the only thing information you're getting is what somebody else said. But as I discussed, like, well, no, actually, the introductions and the prefaces and the footnotes, they really add to the learning of the text. And for me, it's more about, like, personally, Well, I mean, one, I just like, I'm not into like short books. Short books are cool, but for me, it's like, look, I pay for, I don't like paying for a book and it's like really short. I'm like, really? Because it's funny, like, you buy books and it kind of doesn't matter how long the book is. It just costs what it costs. Right? Like, there could be a $20 book that's 100 pages, or there could be a $20 book that's 500 pages. Right? So for me, it's like, give me the heft. This is, I'm getting more for what I paid for. So I really into big ass novels like the Russian novels, like Crime and Punishment, or like some people say, oh, Stephen King books, they're too long. I'm like, I like that. Get what I pay for. So that's one thing. It's like, well, I'm getting more. It's like bonus. It's like you buy a DVD, you get extra content, which is cool. But then on top of that, like, I took a few philosophy classes in college, but I didn't major in it. So when I read these books, I'm not like, going to class. So that's really helpful for me. It's like, when I read the introduction, it's kind of like I'm going to class and I'm listening to the professor before I actually start reading the text. And then, when I read the footnotes, it's kind of like I imagine myself in a class, and the professor is like giving you the added information when in the footnotes. So that's how I treat it. It's like, it's like you're getting a study aid. So I would encourage you, check out, give it a try if you're like a type of person like, I don't read footnotes, or like, I skip intros. I don't know. I think you're missing out on some helpful information. And Ishmael says, Jaquis or Jakes, I don't know how to pronounce it. See, French, so you can. Although Jaquis or Jakes, depending on the language, pronounced. Because I know a guy from Britain, England, and his name is spelled like that. He just says Jakes. But then, somebody from France, they'll say Jaquis. So it really does depend. But Derrida wrote a great essay about the importance of prefaces. Okay, cool. I might check it out. Yeah, that's cool. So thanks for tuning in. That's all I got to say about that. I just wanted to address that. But yeah, thanks for watching. And if no other comment, I'll close out. And peace out. And check out my next video. It won't be. Currently, I'm reading this. This is very popular. It's amazing. I still haven't. The Rhetoric, Aristotle's The Art of Rhetoric, like one of his, very popular works. I don't have a video on it on this channel, so that'll come out eventually. But I'm also reading these other books as well, so they'll come before. But that's something to look forward to in the future if you're into Aristotle. But until next time, peace out. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought. Oh, it's pronounced Jack. So there you go. Like, it just depends. It depends on it depends on the culture. Bye bye.